This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Shipwrecked Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast on the We Made This podcast network, and our continuing coverage of the 3 million years into deep space, otherwise known as the Red Dwarf documentary. And this episode is called In Studio Space, No One Can Hear You Scream. And to talk about this episode, which aired yesterday, which was the 13th of August, 2020, is Matt Latham again. Matt, how's you doing, mate? How's your week been since we last spoke?
Been okay. I've been back at work, so yeah.
Marvellous.
So it's been work.
Have you been actually off work as well during the coronavirus, or is this your first going back then, or have you been back at work for a while?
I've been in and out before 2 weeks, like in and out before I had 2 weeks off. Now last week was my second week of my 2 week my annual leave, so I've been back in, but I've now back in properly now. Like the last, don't know how many weeks before my 2 weeks annual leave, I was in 1 week off the other, kind of alternating with the guy I share an office with, but we're both back in now, so.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everyone's got a story. I mean, mine personally is that I haven't stopped right through, but having said that, there has been the fact that I've been doing things that I wouldn't normally do. And I'm still getting a bit of that, but I'm actually back into the office where I actually reside as of like last week. So even though we're not back to anywhere near normality in my actual work, I am actually back in a place where I'm used to. And there's similar things happening that would happen when I'm at work. So it is getting back to some kind of normality, although, you know, there's a long, long way to go yet, I think. So, but yeah, so we watched... You actually did watch the 3 million years on time this week.
I watched it last week. I was only an hour off.
I know, and now we're 1 minute off.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what we're here to talk about, so we might as well just jump straight in. So what did you make of this week compared to last week?
I think I learned more this week.
Right.
But there was a lot more. There was it completely threw me because it completely structured itself in a way I wasn't expecting, considering what happened, what it was structured last week. But I enjoyed it, I think, a lot more. I learned a lot more, and it was just slightly more entertaining. And a few things that niggled me last week weren't there this week. Yeah. And so yeah, it was a lot more enjoyable, I think. Hurt you?
Yeah, I thought I enjoyed it a lot more. I think I tweeted out halfway through the show actually saying, you know, it was I'm enjoying this a lot more. It definitely, as I kind of predicted last week, it felt like that was more like the introductory episodes for people who are not used to it. This felt more like conversation. Listen, you pointed out last week about the actual Promised Land recording.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that they talked, and we'll probably get into it a bit later on, but they went back to that, but we also went back to Pinewood Studios, and Danny John Jules came out and spoke to the costume designer and things, which felt more natural, and I quite liked that aspect of it. I am disappointed that our game failed miserably.
Yes, I was there going like, about halfway through, I'm like, yeah, I've not heard any licensed music that isn't part of their Dwarf score. I'm like, God damn it.
It was a sort of score that Shipwrecked and Comatose could have come with, actually, because there was very similar synthy, poppy kind of stuff in there, wasn't there?
Yeah.
It's almost like they took a cue from us.
But yeah, I mean, I was going off the basis that they was still going to go through chronologically through the series, because that's the impression that we got last week. So it was going, okay, it was in the 80s, so we built to the 80s, so we're going to go to the 90s now. That's why I assumed there was going to be the incidental music. Well, yeah, the incidental music from the time, but we didn't get any.
No, and still had a slight, it definitely was in the background, a slight like move on into the episodes, because they kind of, when they went through the alternate like versions of Lister and Rimmer and the like, that they were doing the episodes in kind of chronological order, but they just snuck it in. It wasn't more like, and in season 5 episode, Angels and Demons, it was just like, we're basing it on the alternate versions of each of the characters. So it felt like it was slowly building up there, but it was definitely more in the background. I thought that would have been a bit more front and center, really, but it just felt that, they were focusing more on subject matter than anything else, because obviously we had the alternate issue, and we had the space, the shipbuilding and the stuff like that, which we'll get into. But yeah, it did go diff places I wasn't expecting, I must admit.
Yeah, same. I mean, and one thing I noticed as well was that there was I was going to say a lot less talking heads, but there was talking heads, but there was a lot more relevant talking heads. I can probably count on one hand space filler, I could say, where you suddenly had, I think, Katie Brand and Nish Kumar turn up for one talking head for 15 seconds for no apparent reason. So I can't figure out why they would have to have had shown up, considering they had a lot of talk from Ed By, the cast themselves, the costume designer whose name escapes me, the set designer as well. Yeah, so there was a lot more relevant people talking, I felt, rather than the I love the 80s style talking heads. Yeah. So it felt more cohesive, and that it looked like they had enough insider stuff inside their talking heads to actually fill the hour. So I quite like that.
Yeah, it definitely felt more blocked, didn't it? It was more like, we're going to talk about the models and Starbug now, and we're going to talk about this now. So one of the things that I picked up actually was the costume designer was Howard Burden. So that scene, we can talk about Kat, I think, because I quite liked when they were talking at Pinewood that, Danny John Jules is the only character the only person that's not changed size.
that was a very nice way of putting it, I think.
Yes, it was. But yeah, I mean, but even like the little things like the colouring in of the zebra thing, because it didn't have that much money, I thought that stuff like that was like, oh, right, that's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because didn't they just reuse the same zebra skin?
Yeah.
And just paint, and just like colour in with like marker pen, which was ridiculous. But but yeah, I think particularly out the 4 of them, the costumes, I think the cat was the one that probably the one that had the most focus on it. But I never actually realised that there was that much of a departure from, well, obviously, okay, from 2 to 3. Yeah. I mean, like the kind of look and the clothes and the fashion of the characters were changed. I mean, the obvious one is Rimmer, because they go from the grey uniforms to kind of establishing the colour code for the light system. So he's kind of soft light green, and for series 3, and I now actually realised that they had kind of changed Lister's look into the kind of that biker leather jacket. Yeah, until season 3, I never clocked on.
No, it is strange. It's obvious when you see it, but thinking back to it, it was generally his his mustard stained T-shirts or his Gold Jets T-shirts and things like that, wasn't it? That you would generally see in the first couple of seasons.
Because he wears a hat, doesn't he, in the first 2? And I can't remember if he doesn't wear it in the 3rd onwards. Because I'm sure he
definitely wears the hat when he gets that disease on his head, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And he explodes. He's definitely wearing it then. I'm not too sure, but you're right. It is the fact that they've gone. I tell you what, we'll go all out there, make him like a biker arts college kind of graduate kind of thing. And it's the same with the music. I think I've mentioned this somewhere else, but the theme tune, it did not dawn on me, even watching it in all these years, that when I watch a season 1, season 2 episode, that the theme music is different. It was just like it just becomes part of the tapestry, and I don't really think about it. But then when you get it pointed out to you, and this was before this documentary about the theme tune changing, I was like, oh, hang on a second. Of course it is. And then you think about the way they were talking about season 3 here, that, you know, the whole thing, the whole aspect, the whole design and the look and the style changed. And season 3 became, you know, I mean, you think about the Red Dwarf theme tune for the opening, it almost sets you up ready for the show. Whereas the other one was kind of a dystopian kind of theme tune, you know, like it was a, you know, really grand and you know, dark and dingy. But again, it was thinking back to it now, it feels like it's counterproductive in the way that it is. Whereas the newer theme tune from season 3 onwards makes much more sense.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I clocked onto that like years and years and years ago when I think I started watching, when I saw the first episodes from the first 2 series, and I remember watching for the first time, and I'm like, okay, the intro's different, and it's this slow kind of which I think is still technically the main theme, because I think it's kind of retrofitted now that it kind of goes into that. It goes through that, and then it kind of then builds into the dun 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 bit, and then into the full rock version of it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just because it feels like by season 3, and try not to talk about it in specifics because else we'll be saying, oh, we covered this in the 3 million years when we get to the episodes in general. But yeah, I think the kind of oomph in production value, I say oomph, it was probably just an extra few pennies to find down the side of the. So it kind of echoed through everything, and this episode kind of like covered how much it was like a shot in the arm to the look of Red Dwarf and the sound of Red Dwarf. That I think from season 3 onwards, I think when you think of Red Dwarf, that was the genesis of basically the look. I mean, because you had the characters there and then. But then as soon as Crichton comes in and everything's the money, that's when Red Dwarf becomes Red Dwarf. And I think I can't remember the exact quote, but it might have been David Tennant in his voiceover saying that by the end of series 3, that's when he became a phenomenon.
Yeah, and then it started saying, then I think Robert Llewellyn says, when does a cult become becomes so, because it's like, it was massive. And I think I agree with you that Red Dwarf to me is that season 3 onwards look and style, and that's what I think. And I think this is the issue with me not quite getting that theme music, is that I automatically think to like the 3 season, especially like the season 6, and I know that Gunman and Apocalypse was mentioned at the very end of this, ready for next episode, but it's always where I go back to, and I don't know if it's because I just didn't watch them in any particular order at that point, and 1 and 2 may have been like much later on, and it just goes in the mix, and I haven't realised, I haven't watched it maybe like sequentially for so long that I just stick a Red Dwarf on and watch them, and I've probably watched more season 3 to 6 in the short space of time, and I don't think I've really done a rewatch as in like literally from like what we're doing now from 1 to 12. Like sequentially, and it's just interesting that we forget things like that.
I'll say that I do. I mean, as rewatching series 2, I think series 2 is a lot it's a lot stronger in places than perhaps I remember it being, because there's no dud in that series at all. Yeah, whereas I think it's very consistently high season, and that's probably down to some of the low-key story characters, but it was the first time it was kind of delving into science fiction. It just didn't have the production value, so I think you can kind of see the ambition of future series show in series 2.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
So because you had like stuff like Parallel Universe and like at the end of the series and stuff, and like Crichton turning up, and so you kind of had, so the ambition was there. So I think it was only until they had that extra few pennies that it was finally realised. Yeah,
I'd say another thing as well, that I mean, we talked about cat costumes, and they only very briefly went on to Crichton, and when they were talking about the general design, because obviously he's a mechanoid and that's it. But then they started talking about his mask and stuff, and some of the analogy of like wearing a hot water bottle on your head for 12 hours. It was actually quite good, actually, because I thinking about having a hot water bottle over your head is it's quite scary. Really. I'm not a fan of being knocked out. When I went to the dentist, I always remember saying, I want an injection. Don't put a rubber mask on me. And they did towards the end, and I thought I was like struggling, like fuck, basically, just like, no, get off me. And apparently my arms were just like sort of just swooning around it slowly. But they put the mask on me, and I didn't like it, and that kind of took me back to that. Just thinking of having this hot water bottle on your head for so long, and I like they're bringing into the season 12 stuff where I think it's Siliconia where I mean, I know again Mark obviously hasn't seen these yet, but the fact that they got a chance to like envisage what that was, and I quite liked the talking about the scene I think it was Ed Bye talking with the water when he all that Robert Llewellyn did was push his face and water would come out, and then we got an actual visual of Craig Charles like tipping his head to one side, and I was like, oh god. Yeah.
And I mean, there's probably quite a few different interviews about this now where they were talking about, goes, oh, is this Rob Llewellyn getting his revenge or anything? And but I think apparently for like 30 years, apparently they've been giving him grief, saying, man up, it's only a mask, and a lot. I think a lot of them have got a better appreciation for basically what he's had to go through to put that mask on. And, and I did quite like the there's two things actually about that from Craig Charles. One was during the basically discussion on the set of Starbug, where they're saying that him and Danny John Jules would be like coming in from a night out on the lash at the Hacienda in Manchester at 5 a.m. and get some few hours sleep for a call sheet, and then Robert Llewellyn was waking up ready to go into makeup.
Yeah, I picked that up. I made a note on that because I definitely wanted to bring that up, because it's like, can you imagine? I'm just imagining like Craig Charles and Danny John Jules and Chris Barry all going out and going to Hacienda, and as he mentions, like Happy Mondays and stuff like that, right at the peak of like early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And the fact that Robert Llewellyn's having to go in at that time in the morning. And they were actually saying that they actually think they did pass at one point. It's just like, that must be so bizarre, or so like pissed off you would be, the fact that you're going into work and your mates are like sort of running against the walls, going back to the hotel room and stuff.
Yeah, but then I think Craig Charles was then saying, was like, but he's made loads out of it, so I don't know what he's complaining about. Yeah, it's like you've had enough with a man behind the mask book. So like, yeah, it's like God, he's made a mint out of it, so I don't know what he's moaning about. But I think they said like it's gotten a lot easier to apply the mask throughout the years, because isn't it down to like 5 hours rather than 11?
Yeah, he said 5 or 6 hours. That's what he said on the thing. But I'm sure that they've said it took longer, because even the actual cast was saying, wasn't it about 8-9 hours? And they said no, it's 5 or 6. So I'm not too sure. It definitely reduced in time now, because it's more of like the way things have changed, and maybe like 4 hours or something, 3 hours maybe. But I thought it was longer than what he said. So I would have to look into that and see what the actual, or what other quotes have been on that. It might even be on the Red Dwarf book I've got actually that said how long it took. But it was interesting. Yeah, and so they get round that. So they talk about the sort of the costumes and that, and I liked it again, the fact that it was all during the Promised Land thing. They were just chatting, and I think they mentioned it as well with Tony Hawk's. When they're talking about Tony Hawk's with such affection, saying he's basically the sixth dwarfer and the Caligula stuff, I thought was quite a nice touch.
Yeah, I quite like that, because I think when he basically just kept slapping Craig Charles in the face repeatedly in the back. And I think actually in the clip you can kind of see Danny John Jules as a cat trying not to laugh as well. And I never actually realised Tony Hawk was like the hype man. I know he'd been in, because I think, didn't he do the voice Doesn't he do a voice of a robot or two?
It's Talkie Toaster.
Yeah, Talkie Toaster as well. But
yeah,
I didn't realise he was the hype man or the warm guy either.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. We've talked about that on the podcast early doors. I think we're talking about that because I got Tony Hawk's mixed up completely when we talked about the toaster. I remember talking about that, and I think I can't remember exactly how or why or who I was getting him mixed up with. But it was quite embarrassing. I was like, it's probably on record, I think. I'm like, oh no, I've got that wrong. But never mind. I might have cut it out, and this is the exclusive. So, we all get things wrong. But yeah, and there was a few little outtakes as well, which was in here as well, like the lean-in thing when they were talking about the audience. Which and they just, and I don't think we're going to get any more than this, but they just mentioned 7 and 9 not having an audience, and that was it. There was like no other information about that whatsoever. It's like, apart from 7 and 9, we've always had an audience. It was like, all right, okay. So yeah. I don't know. Where do you think we're going to go next? Because this one threw me a bit of a loop, as we mentioned at the top of the hour there, that we were expecting it to go one way, and now they're going to talk about the science. They're going to talk about Gunman of the Apocalypse. I don't know what else there was. What else were they looking at? There was something else. There were
guest stars.
Guest stars, yes. I'm not entirely sure where I don't think we're going to touch upon much as 7, 8, and 9. Maybe Back to Earth and the new stuff, but I don't know if we're going to get it all in that last hour.
No, it's a shame as well, I think, because they've still got the talking heads for McDonald. As well, and
so we could still get a bit of a.
I think that'll probably end up being to do with the guest stars and so they'll probably end up talking about the growing cast, and I'm going to resign myself that we probably won't get a full good chunk dedicated to the character of Kachansky, even though I do think they should actually give her some exploration of her, but
I think it's a big miss if they don't mention. Because she's not really a guest. Would you class her as a guest star? Well, I suppose you would class her as a guest star, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, Seven, you pretty much she's a member of the cast. So,
and
let's hope.
Well, she's one of the main characters in 8 as well. So,
well, yeah, of course she is. Yeah. Let's hope that we do. As we mentioned last week, that we get a bit of Chloe Annette. And Claire Grogan would be amazing.
Going back to the whole thing, I really like the stuff about the relationship with the studio audience as well, because I was talking about at one point how it was hard to remember lines and stuff, and I remember thinking while watching it, going, well, surely if you approach it like you would a play, it'd be easier because you have to do the. But because you can't have, because you'll go to the theatre and you can't expect the theatre actors to mess up their lines and go whoopsie, but the one thing that really struck me, I think it was Danny John Jules that said that there was points where they'll start recording and nothing was hitting in terms of jokes, and it wasn't explicitly said, but the idea was that as soon as you fluff a line, it would loosen up and relax everyone.
Yeah.
And I think the suggestion was that they probably perhaps once or twice kind of faked.
Yeah.
It wasn't explicitly said, but they might have faked a smeg up just to kind of break the ice and tension.
Yeah, well, do you know what? It instantly pulled me back to a smeg up where I think Rimmer says something and he turns around, and Chris Barry turns around to the screen and says, "I've gone and messed up," in the very first line of the show, and that instantly jumped to me. I was like, "Oh right, are they meaning something like that?" It did feel that did pick up to me actually thinking about it. That and also I've just seen a note, by the way, which I just have to mention right now. They mentioned laughter the summer wine. Honest to God, I was laughing just purely on the back of our conversation last week when they mentioned it about the special effects. I thought it was brilliant. We'll come into special effects in a minute, but yeah, that is interesting that as you say, it almost loosened them up. I didn't think about it in the way you're thinking about it actually, but yeah, I could imagine them maybe, forgetting to lean, for example, like they showed on the later season, where they sort of lean into one side and Chris Barry doesn't go, and she went, "Oh, I'm meant to lean, aren't I?" I can imagine something like that maybe picking up. So,
yeah, but I do. I mean, I've never seen. I'd love to have been to to go to recording, but I've never been to a sitcom recording, so it'd probably be very weird. But I'm assuming a lot of because I can't see it ever being like filmed sequentially in normal order. I don't know how it works, but I mean, they must like realise that they're not going to get a full kind of narrative when they go and view it, so they must try and make it as entertaining as possible. So, and I think, and they did say that the audience probably expects the smeg ups, and that's the entertaining. So, like, if they go in to see a recording, then at least if they can kind of see the actors enjoying themselves when they mess up, then I think that's more of a good time. Gives the audience a good time rather than just like seeing bam, 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 scene, laugh, 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 and in an order that they probably wouldn't really understand because they might be shooting the things in order. They never actually mentioned anything about that, which, well, like in terms of like the blocking and breaking of the story and how they film it. I mean, it's probably not as interesting, but
it'd be interesting for us probably. But,
So, like, I mean, if anyone's listening who's either who's gone to see Red Dwarf be recorded live or any sitcom live, actually, please get in touch because that's something I'm quite fascinated about, actually.
Yeah. Well, I actually applied for tickets for 10, I think, and I obviously didn't get them. And I think I must have applied for tickets for 11 and 12 because I remember 11 and 12. I think they were being filmed in November and February of like over the course of like those 6 months, and I didn't get any of that time as well. So I definitely applied for 11 and 12, 10, 11 and 12. I think I've seen somewhere where they do film scenes, and you'll have the floor managers say what the lead up is to it. So they'll say like, well, so we're just in Starbug at the moment. They've just left Red Dwarf, and this has happened, and then they'll say, and we're in the part now where Lister is thinking about what to say to Kat about the fact that he might have to undergo an operation. This is just me making it up, and then then it's like play scene kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of like floor manager narrating, and I don't know where I've got that from, but I kind of remember seeing something along those lines. Yeah,
they also had there's a bit of, well, not loads, but they did dedicate some talk about Marooned, which was and like the fact it was like a two-way street and how that was before, how they had to do that with
handheld cameras.
Well, with the studio audience and how they went off that. So the bit with the handheld cameras I never noticed before, actually. I never noticed that.
Yeah, it's that claustrophobic kind of thing, isn't it? It always like stands out to me with the dog food bit. I always remember that. I didn't realise it was all like that though. I thought there was just that scene. But I like things like that. I like things like looking at Dutch angles and things on camera views and stuff. So I tend to pick up on camera stuff. But it was quite surprising. I didn't realise it was a two-handle thing. But what I quite like, and this is something that happened in the show as well about Red Dwarf, and one of the things I really, really do like about it, and it probably happens in lots of sitcoms, is you mentioned about the theatre kind of aspect to it. Now, I think the problem with something like Red Dwarf and learning the lines and stuff is that you don't have the time like you would in a theatre to actually go through it. So you're only maybe going one table talk, read through, maybe a quick draft through a scene, rehearse through a scene, and then you're on. So there's not like, your weeks of going through each bit and, learning it off by heart. So I think which helps us for the smeg ups, obviously, but you get scenes like in Marooned where they're playing off the audience, or the obvious one's Polymorph, which they talk about with the shorts, which is it's just a so amazing thing, and the fact that they couldn't hear each other, which I've never really spotted that before. The fact that they're literally screaming at each other because they can't hear each other. Yeah,
Chris Barry. I mean, I think it's even the shot they had to use in the episode. But Chris Barry looks like he's trying to fight the urge to break because he's smirking throughout all that.
Yeah,
I mean, like you can see Chris Barry. I mean, it's completely. I've always saw that shot as like not as in character, but I think it would be physically impossible for Chris Barry to be able to play that as Rimmer would.
Yeah. Definitely. And that happens so much. I think there's a scene within this actually when Holly says something, and he says it, and you can totally tell he's smirking as soon as he says it. And I love that. I think it's endearing, to be honest. But I always think about of recent Red Dwarf history, things like the moose joke, where so it ends. I mean, hopefully, I'm hoping Mark's not listening to this, but when it ends, and the line is delivered, Danny John Jules waits an age for the audience to calm down, and then he goes. I mean, I think actually, I think I bagged that episode because I love. That's one of my favourite bits of the Red Dwarf. But it's the fact with but we can relate it to the studio the studio audience. And I'm pretty sure actually that there was actually a shot of them filming that scene. One of the wide shots, I think. I'm convinced it was one of them. But it's the fact that it's the fact that the joke had been built up for like about 15 minutes, and they talk about it and over an ad break as well.
Over an ad break, and then the cat walks in, and immediately the audience knows what's going to happen and start laughing because they know exactly what's going to happen. Because the fact the cat walks in, and even before Rimmer gets the idea, the audience start laughing because the cat walks in, and I think that and funny, it's because the relationship with the studio audience, they know the character. They know they can kind of say they know what's kind of gonna happen, and and it's just it's the same when I think particularly in whenever Holly shows up as a surprise, they've always commented that they can just go out for an hour and come back and the audience is still cheering. So it's that kind of thing, and and it's a shame they don't delve on the lack of audience for 7 and 9, because I would have loved to see how perhaps even if it was just the cast talking for 30 seconds about how the relationship and timing changes, because I think whilst I do quite like 7, that aspect does kind of impact back to earth, and you can kind of feel it, and the relationship with the audience kind of if Tony Hawk's is the 6th dwarf, the audience is the 7th.
Yeah, that's definitely, I would completely agree with that. And but it's I think from a balance point of view, it would have been nice rather than just David Tennant just literally just saying apart from 7 and 9 they've always had an audience. It's right, well, can we maybe have a little bit on the reasons behind it? Or can we have a little bit on, well, we tried it didn't really work, or we tried it, we want it to be more American sitcom-y, or whatever it may be, and we'll talk about that when we get to 7. But it's it just seemed like it was not cheap, but just effective, just to go, this is the audience, this is part of what Red Dwarf is. Let's forget 7 and 9 because obviously they didn't have audiences in and move on. With the reasons for that, we just don't know. But it is interesting how they just kind of just. When talking about that, they've just skipped over it. What about the special effects then? I mean, Peter Ragg. I mean, I've seen that Peter Ragg's son's been tweeting quite a lot last night as well, and I think Ed By or Doug Nail, I think it might have been. It was really saying really kind words for thank you for speaking of my dad in that way and things, which was lovely to see. But I particularly like that because I think the way the built up was and the special effects, and everyone's probably going to knock certain things in Red Dwarf, and I did see Starbug, and I saw that Rimmer was in his costume, and I was like, I'm getting the Action Man scene, I'm getting it. And it didn't quite go there. I was like, oh no, never mind. But the Thunderbird stuff and the Captain Scarlet and all that, and the Doctor Who stuff as well, I thought was that was a nice little part that I really enjoyed that section.
Yeah, definitely. It was quite nice, and it was particularly as well. I think a lot of the lo-fi special effects, I think it adds to the charm. I think. I agree. Yeah, totally agree. And I mean, the mention about the hologram stuff in the first 2. How they got Chris Barry to pretend to fall through or just go through a table and stuff, and so I quite like they touched on that.
Yeah, and I like the blue screen that we get with Craig Charles as well when he does his hand through Rimmer in season 1, and you see the fabric of the blue screen when he passes through. And I thought I didn't even think about how that works from having a contact through the actual fabric to make it look like he's going through Rimmer. And that was only it's literally not even a second of seeing that on screen, but it was oh, hang on. Yeah, of course they would need to do that, to display Rimmer on that part and have something feel like it was moving as he went through his hand. So I enjoyed that aspect to it as well. And I think that they were genuinely in awe of Peter Ragg, weren't they? When they said about Virgil Tracy and actually physically has pictures of him, and it's like, well, he can do anything he wants now. It's entirely up to him. We've got the way that, as we mentioned, season 3 ups the game, and they're saying, it's such a big change in kind of style and look that, the fact that they've got somebody that good and the fact that he knows what he's doing was kind of like endearing to them all. Right, Starbug. What have you seen that? Did you ever see the first Starbug design? Have you? I think I've seen that before. I don't know about you.
No, that's the first time I saw it.
Right. Okay. It stood out to me as potentially something that we got on, and I know they talked about it was a lesser design and they've built dozens and stuff.
It felt like a rip-off of Thunderbird 4, if I was completely honest.
Yeah. I could see that. I'm definitely not making Tracy Island though. Let's not go down Blue Peter style. We do talk about the scutters a little bit. We've discussed that on the podcast before. I don't think we need to really go through that again. But the alternative, when they start to talk about the alternative episodes, things like Polymorph, and we've got Back to Reality, they talk about that for a little bit, and then you have to go through the Dwayne Dibley stuff. And this is probably the first time that we've ever mentioned Dwayne Dibley on the podcast. No, which was great. But I liked the fact that another Rimmer, which I completely forgot about, and we need to do a special on it. It's alternate versions of Rimmer. I watched the season 12 episode recently, and I completely forgot there was an alternative version of Rimmer in that one as well. And this one we've got the kind of Rocky Horror Show Rimmer, don't we? And it was nice to see the Demons and Angels one again, because I not completely forgot about the episode, but when it came on, I was like, oh yes. And then I wanted to, and they didn't, to see the bit where he says, "I'm going to have you," and they didn't do that, didn't go that far, which was a shame.
Interestingly enough, they did not mention Ace Rimmer.
Yes, that is interesting. Yes,
they mentioned Dwayne.
Yeah,
but they never clocked Ace Rimmer, which I'd argue to be the more popular out of the two between him and Dwayne Dibley, which I found that quite interesting. Then again, that might be my Rimmer bias, but
no, I mean, Ace. I'm trying to think back to like people in the street that I've seen that generally. Ace Rimmer, I would see Ace Rimmer's T-shirt more often than I would do something with Dwayne Barry on it. You'd always see "Smoke Me a Kipper."
Dwayne Dibley.
Dwayne Dibley. Yeah, you'd always see "Smoke Me a Kipper" with Ace Ventura. Ace Ventura. Oh my god!
Oh god, you've turned into me.
With Ace Rimmer, when we see Ace Rimmer on a T-shirt in the general public, I don't see any Dwayne Dibley ones. But Dwayne Dibley seems to get the best response when you see it on the show, I think.
Definitely. Yeah, but I think in terms of character, I think there's a lot more potential for Ace. But in terms of character, well, I think we've seen that. I think there's more of a character for Ace than there perhaps is for Dwayne. I think Dwayne Dibley is a very funny joke, but I think Ace feels like a better character. Like an actual character rather than just an excuse for Danny John Jules to be dorky.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'm wondering, because of the science involved, I think next week we're talking about science, whether or not Dimension Jump will be in that. Because it's alternative realities, isn't it?
Yeah.
So maybe let's hold that thought until next week. As my guess would be that Ace Rimmer, they can't not mention Ace Rimmer in a 3-part documentary about Red Dwarf. They can't. It's not possible. I mean,
unless they want to skim over Chris Barry's holiday, but holiday in Series 7. But
that's it is an interesting one that I can't see that they're going to have to mention Ace Rimmer. I can't see them not mentioning it. It's just, it seems to be a big gap in the law.
Yeah.
And it's too big a gap in the law. I mean, as I say, having And I think that thematically we talk about Danny Jones-Jules costumes, and then we talk about Dwayne Dibley. So it's like the polar opposite of what we've just been talking about that. And Rimmer hasn't really been talked about in that sense, apart from obviously the fact that he's playing with the Hollow Whip and stuff. So yeah, let's park that one for now, and then let's see what happens next week with that. They brought in Dave Coleman's Extraordinary, which I completely forgotten about as well on the Smeg Ups. It's Extraordinary, which I always loved on the on the Smeg Ups and stuff, and I like the fact that that when they're referring back to some of the Smeg Ups, that Robert Llewellyn came back with the bag of chips. There's a bag of chips in it for you. The fact that they remember stuff like that, is nice that they kind of hold that personally as well. Because you obviously we see it, we know that we've seen those. It's there's the classic Smeg Up where he says, "I've just cacked me pants," which is one of my favourite ever Smeg Ups. And I know it's not a Smeg Up as such; it's just like stop doing it. But that kind of Boys from the Dwarf kind of feel to it, and the fact that they're remembering things like the bag of chips and stuff is really interesting.
Yeah, I don't think I've actually seen any of the Smeg Ups properly. I think I've only ever seen them clips. I never saw any of the actual Smeg Up videos, I don't think.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's going to have to change. Have you seen the ones I've mentioned?
I can't remember. There must be some on the DVDs, but I can't remember many of them.
Right. Okay.
I can't remember.
That needs to change, Matt. That might be your homework to go through that and come back to us. But yeah, I mean, other than that, really, it felt. I mean, I thought this one might be a bit shorter, to be honest, this week, because there was a lot of like just general discussion about the episodes and particular bits, and there was a couple of jokes in there. There was about the hacienda. There was some very standard, straightforward stuff, which was really interesting. Whereas last week we had a bit more to talk about the style and with which the change. But is there anything else that you wanted to bring up that I might have missed?
There was I think there's a good quote from where Robert Llewellyn goes, "If there's a working prop, Craig Charles hasn't touched it yet." And then he's had like a montage of clips of basically things breaking whenever Craig Charles looks at them.
Yeah, that I did enjoy that. I mean, even like some of it as simple as the one where he's walking out with a backpack and he knocks the little bar that's next to him and it falls behind him.
Yeah,
it's not even that funny, but in the context of like him breaking stuff, it makes total sense.
There was a bit as well. I think it looked like it was from Back to Earth. There was filming, and he did something. And he made a joke saying, "Well, that's a sturdy prop." And Danny Jules goes, "It's been a few years since we've said that." It just must be an ongoing joke that everything breaks.
Yeah. No, that was brilliant. It was. Because it was on Back to Earth as well, where we saw Danny Jules in his purple lycra kind of swimsuit thing as well, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
That is, I mean, how on earth he gets away with that, I just don't know. I really don't, but it just works, and it is so ludicrous, right? If you didn't know the cat as a character, it's just ridiculous, but the fact that he gets away with it's amazing. But yeah, I think that brings it up then. I think that wraps us up for this week. So, how did we do in the music quiz? Did we do? Did we do any very well? Is there many songs in there? Are we going to expect any more next week?
Well, at the moment, our score is currently 0 out of 6. So,
do you think we'll have any songs next week, apart from maybe the song?
The Rimmer song, the Rimmer song, the Rimmer Experience song, but I hope so, because I love that bit. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, he's Arnold Rimmer,
Yeah, without him, life would be much dimmer. So I don't know. Whether it's just let's have a rollover and see if the 6 that he picked carry on.
Let's do that. Let's do that. So we're going to be talking about guest stars. We're going to talk about, not special effects. So we've got guests. What have we got? So we've got guest stars. We've got Gunman of the Apocalypse, which seems to be like, because that was Emmy winning, wasn't it?
Yes.
So I think obviously that is the epitome of where Red Dwarf was. So the fact that they're going to talk about that is pertinent, really. And then obviously, which guest stars are going to come. You mentioned obviously Hollister, and he does appear in season 12 as well. So and he's obviously already been a talking head. So that pretty much nails him on to be talking about that. So it's going to be an interesting one next week, and just how they're going to wrap things up and what they're going to do. What are you looking forward to potentially seeing then? Because it is a bit up in the air now. I thought we might have had more of an idea of what we were going to expect. But
yeah, I mean,
it's throwing it up in the air.
Yeah, if there was going sequentially, then I probably would have thought this would have been covering the Dave era. But I honestly have no idea. I mean, in terms of guests, I've got a feeling there'll probably be a focus on the Dave bit, because I think the guests are slightly more well known in the Dave era, because you got to say they highlight Johnny Vegas. There's James Buckley. Yeah, James Buckley's in I think in 11. I think. Yeah, so I honestly don't know. I mean, I could probably say a whole load of stuff and it won't happen. So, yeah.
Let's just say, in fact, there's an episode on it. Just say everything that you don't want to happen, and that will happen. I can't remember. That's a season 12 episode.
Yeah.
Where everything they say is the total opposite happens. So, but yeah, maybe in an alternative universe we'll be all right. But yeah, so that I would say let's wrap this up then, because I think we've run out of things. I don't think there's anything else we need to touch upon from what I've seen. So where can people find you online? And you are going to come back on next week, I hope. And let's talk about the final episode of this 3-part documentary series.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about basically next week about the upcoming season 2 and where we are with that. But where can people find you online right now?
They can find me online through my podcast, which is Pick a Disc, and you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter under that name. And you can also follow my new podcast, which is Ask Us About Loom, which follows games of the point-and-click adventure genre.
Excellent stuff. And you can find me on Twitter at rmuldrake. It's RMULDRAKE. And find me on the Xcast as well. We're just wrapping up there. We're just maybe a couple of weeks away from finishing the Fight the Future Minute, which is a X-Files film, The Fight the Future, out in 1998, where the Xcast crew have been going through that minute by minute, day by day over the summer. And so we're just about to finish that up, coming up soon. So those are the best two places at this moment in time, at time of recording, to come and find me as well. So thank you very much, Matt, again for coming on. It's time for us to set a course, and you can take the Blue Midget this week. I'll take Starbug, and yeah, we'll see you next week. But until next time, remember everyone.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Pretty Fly, a 90s nostalgia podcast.
I dropped out of college,
Is that really what this episode's about? You just need to work through that today, or?
Yeah, this is cheap therapy for me. If you can abide. How does
that make you feel?
Look, to answer the question honestly, I think it kind of holds up a little bit of a mirror to me and makes me realize that maybe I haven't done everything that I wanted to do with my life.
Cerebral Jukebox.
You saying it hadn't been recorded yet, it was purely a sort of live number.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's what stuck it more in your head because you didn't have the recording to fall back on?
Well, yeah, I think I think it taps into the essence of why songs can be super annoying, because it's about an exorcism thing. I was chatting to my wife earlier about doing this podcast, and she said that she always has a kind of she gets a flush song.
Frame to frame.
On the subject of Hercules, that was one of the films I really, really had in mind watching this. This was the first time I'd watched it. And I think not just the trope of having who were effectively the muses in Hercules, But having those people that are there singing the songs and being able to sort of set the scene, that was one aspect of it. But musically, there were certain songs and riffs that sounded very similar and very similarly influenced.
Well, I'd be very surprised if Menken's work on Hercules wasn't influenced by Little Shop of Horrors. I mean, on Hercules, you've got the gospel. It's the gospel choir, isn't it? And I think there is certainly an underlying gospel influence in Little Shop of Horrors, in as much as gospel underpins a lot of soul and Motown music.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.